to this episode of Full Spectrum Living with CBD. I am Meredith, your co-host here with our hosts Adrian and Jessica. And today we actually have a special guest. We're really excited to welcome her. This is Amanda Nybert, and she is a certified dietitian. And she's joining us today because we wanted to have a conversation about nutrition and how it impacts the endocannabinoid system. So I know, Adrian, you had a few thoughts on this to kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, we wanted to bring Amanda here because we're definitely not experts when it comes to nutrition. And we do know that studies show that the endocannabinoid system can be nurtured and enhanced by things that you're consuming, right? Which is then going to help CBD help you. So we brought Amanda here. So I'm going to actually start with something that we get asked all the time. And people come in looking for help with inflammation all the time, right? We know CBD is largely beneficial. So what kind of foods can people eat, or what can they do in their nutritional routine to help with inflammation?
Yeah, well, hey, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here to talk about this really popular topic. Inflammation is a really hot topic right now for everybody looking to kind of improve their health. And it's a broad topic to kind of think about because there's a lot of things that impact inflammation in the body, food being one of those very specifically. So whenever I'm asked about inflammation in general, the foods that kind of come to mind at the top of the list are going to be gluten, dairy, sugar, seed oils, vegetable seed oils, are kind of the big ones. Sometimes soy will kind of fall in there, but anything that's highly processed with a lot of additives is going to really ramp up inflammation in the body.
Okay. So you seem to be an advocate for the whole foods then.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think what people don't realize is that anything that you're dealing with in regards to like your health, whether it be diabetes or hypertension, joint pain, autoimmune disease, it's all made from inflammation. Mm-hmm. So anytime that you can simmer inflammation in the body, you're going to improve on those health conditions. So it's really the foundation of improving your health is to really look at how can I reduce inflammation in my body.
Okay. You know, Amanda, I think it would be awesome if you could just give us really maybe even a definition of inflammation, because it is such a hot topic and we are hearing so much about it, but I wonder if everybody really even knows what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime that you have something going on in your body, you know, we have this natural inflammatory response. And in most cases, that's supposed to be something really beneficial. You know, if we get sick, like I'm suffering from a little cold right now, I typically don't sound like a frog, but when you're sick and you have a healthy immune system, then that, is going to support you getting better. But when you have levels of unhealthy inflammation in the body, then that's actually going to make you sicker. So it's kind of like a negative response that you'll see that can kind of, it starts really slow. It's like a really, small fire. And then the more inflammation you kind of add to it, the bigger and bigger it gets. And I think a lot of people see that with their health, 10 years ago, something happens and it creates this kind of small change in the way they feel. And then over time, it kind of builds and builds and builds and kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so anytime that you can do things to, again, reduce that overall inflammatory response in the body, it's a good thing.
So I
was sorry, Jess. I was just going to chime in. I thought it was really interesting how she talked about like it starts small and then over time it layers and layers and layers. That kind of goes with what we say with CBD and why it doesn't work overnight, right? So this isn't a condition that was started yesterday and you can take something and it's going to completely go away. So adding CBD into your daily routine and including that in your nutritional well-being as well, adding fruits and vegetables that are going to help do that is going to help that process of peeling back that inflammation go a little bit faster, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not an overnight response when you're dealing with reducing inflammation.
I wanted to ask, actually, if we can backtrack just one moment. When you were saying about seed oils being pro-inflammatory, would you consider hemp seed oil to be pro-inflammatory? Because that is a question I imagine we would probably get.
Yeah, no, I think we're talking more about highly processed oils that are oxidized and put through, hexane and butane and all these things. Well, I know you guys use that, but, that we put into high heat and those things. So more processed seed oils like vegetable oil, canola oil, those tend to be, highly oxidative.
And then my secondary question there was, so those are some really good foods to remove. I always function best in a flood out the bad stuff by adding in good stuff. So what are some really inflammation busting foods you could add to your diet as opposed to take out?
Well, first and foremost is vegetables. Anytime that you can incorporate high nutrient dense foods, foods with lots of antioxidants, lots of vitamins and minerals, lots of fiber, that's going to be the best case scenario. So vegetables are always the first on my list. And I always say, what's the one food group we don't eat enough of? Vegetables. What's the one food group that we should be eating more of? Vegetables. It should definitely encompass at least half of your plate when you are making your meals each day.
And just to be clear, vegetables, not potatoes. More of the green leafy is what we're looking for, right?
Yeah, right. Potato is our number one vegetable in the United States, and that's a problem. So
followed by peas and corn. And
and they actually consider ketchup to be a vegetable in the school system. When we're looking at healthy lunches, they can count ketchup as one serving of vegetables. So we definitely have it very backwards in the United States, but it's all about balance. The more color you can get in your diet. So anytime you're only eating all white foods or all green foods, that's not a good thing. You want purple and orange and red and, green and white. So the more variety you can find in the color, just the larger the nutrient intake is going to be.
Okay. So eat a rainbow.
Eat the rainbow.
Eat a rainbow.
Yeah, right.
So you mentioned something, you said antioxidant. So kind of explain what that means, because again, CBD is also known for being antioxidant.
Right.
We say it all the time, but our consumers may not know what the difference between being antioxidant or anti-inflammatory, or what's the benefits of those.
Yeah. So antioxidants are really powerful because they attack free radicals in the body, and free radicals create a lot of inflammation. The more free radicals you have, the higher your inflammatory response is. So anytime that you can consume more antioxidants to help reduce that free radical, to help improve, that inflammatory response, you're going to feel so much better. Okay. So free radicals are what create disease and, cancer and unfavorable health conditions. So that's the benefit of antioxidants.
And the free radicals come from where? Just from food, from environment, from, okay.
Yes, fruits, vegetables. Those are where you're going to get antioxidants the most. You can actually get our number one source of antioxidants. Can you guess what it is?
I'm going to say kale. I have no idea.
It's really sad.
I don't know.
It's actually coffee. Whoa. Coffee is our number one source of antioxidants. And
there you go, Jess. Load it up.
And it's a good thing because we love coffee, and coffee is really high in antioxidants and polyphenols, but it's a bad thing because it's a really big sign that we're not eating enough kale.
Okay.
That we're not eating enough vegetables in order to get more antioxidants from that food group. So unfortunately, maybe, Starbucks is giving us the most antioxidants when really whole food should be, So yeah, I know. All about balance and moderation though, for sure.
So someone starts making these choices, right? And I love Jessica's idea of, let's talk about what we can add in versus, always being in this concept of deprivation, because I don't think we function really well when we always think about what we can't have. So let's say we start making these changes and we're starting to eat more green veggies and we're reducing, fast foods and processed foods. We're drinking more water. We're doing these things. How do we start to notice those shifts in our body? What are the things that we might begin to feel or see as we make those changes?
And they're pretty immediate. I know the long-term benefits take a while, but typically my clients will report physical changes in the way they feel and the way they look within the first 14 days. So we all carry about 5 to 10 pounds of inflammation on our body at all times. And actually the biggest area in which we see the most noticeable inflammation is in our midsection. We carry kind of like that 5 to 10 pounds of extra, fluff, fluid, bloating, kind of in our midsection. So when you start to remove, I know you're talking about adding things back versus removing, but when you do really start to replace some of those inflammatory foods, gluten and dairy are the ones that I really focus on the most, because it's like when you put all of these things together, gluten, dairy, and sugar are the big ones. But once you start to really cut back on those and consume more, fruits and vegetables, things like that, you immediately start to see that kind of like reduce in bloating, reduce in kind of like that puffy feeling. Your energy gets much higher. You sleep better. So it's pretty pronounced right off the bat, if you can really kind of dive into it.
5 to 10 pounds of inflammation.
Right.
That's crazy.
Like
at all times.
Pounds of inflammation, like inflamed fat tissues, or?
I mean, usually it's in the form of like fluid, maybe some secondary fat, but this is a really good example. So say that you are, really dialed in, you're a healthy eater, you're conscious of all these things, and you go on vacation and you live your best life. You consume more alcohol than maybe you would, you eat, foods that you wouldn't eat on a regular basis, and you come home and you've gained 5 pounds. We all see that. Well, a lot of times my clients will be like, oh my God, I just gained 5 pounds of fat. And so I tell them, I'm like, no, you didn't. You just gained 5 pounds of inflammation. So as long as you set forth to get back to your healthy lifestyle, that 5 pounds will be gone within 5 to 7 days, because it's not fat. It's inflammation. It's that fluid retention. It's that bloat. So it's a really great way for me to help them to see, listen, you didn't just undo all the success that you made in, 4 days, 5 days, whatever. Your body's just giving you that kind of inflammatory response. It's telling you that it doesn't like, the way you lived and the foods that you consumed over that time. But if you get right back to it, you'll be right back to where you started.
I love that. And that makes perfect sense, because how many times have you've gone on vacation and you're just like, oh my gosh, I didn't eat, 3,500 calories is a pound. And you're like, there's no way I ate that much, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's not possible it would be really hard to gain, 5 pounds of true fat in that short of a time.
I think you kind of touched on something I think I always associate as the single biggest issue for inflammation in the American diet, which is sugar, and the amount of sugar just hidden in everything we eat. Could you talk a little bit about ways to really, curb sugar cravings, or just your general intake throughout the day?
Yeah, absolutely. In the 1970s, when the government came out with that food guide pyramid, it was all about fat. Fat's bad for you. Fat makes you fat. We got to cut fat. We got to cut calories. And what happened is when they came out with those guidelines, the manufacturers of food ran with it. And so what they did is they started to pull all the fat out of their food, and what they add, carbs and sugars. So we actually eat 4 to 5 times the amount of carbs and sugars today that we did in 1977 when the government came out with those food guide pyramid. And ironically, we eat 25% less fat than we did in 1977. And we're more obese than we ever have been, more sick. Obviously our health is at a huge decline. And it is really all of that added sugar and carbohydrates that has created this epidemic of obesity, of heart disease, of diabetes, of joint pain, autoimmune conditions, kind of across the board. And it hasn't been really until about the last 10 years that we've kind of honed in on the fact that we need to stop worrying so much about fat, and we need to worry more about carbohydrates and sugar. And the problem is that carbohydrates and sugar are hidden everywhere, okay? So for example, can you guess how many grams of sugar are in a cup of low-fat milk?
Ooh. 27.
Okay, 27.
There you go.
Would you think that milk would have a lot of sugar in it?
It doesn't, it's not the first thing that comes to mind
when you
to be
think of
honest,
milk.
when I think of
So
milk.
1 cup of milk is 12 grams of sugar.
Wow.
So, we look at something as healthy as like, we consider milk to be super healthy. We encourage our children to drink it at every meal. They serve it at school lunch. So they drink a cup in the morning. They drink chocolate milk at lunch. They drink a cup in the evening. And by the end of the day, just from the consumption of milk, they've had almost 40 grams of sugar.
Ooh.
So,
and is that from, did you say from skim or low fat or?
well, it doesn't matter. I always say skim milk because people think skim milk has less sugar in it than whole milk, but it actually has the same amount of sugar
Wow.
as whole milk. So they both have 12 grams of sugar. They have different amounts of fat because that's what we've been so focused on. But we don't really think about the sugar.
I have a milk drinking child who I'm trying to cut sugar out for. So would it be ideally a little, I mean, of course, to scale back the amount of milk that your kid's drinking, but is it arguably better than to have something like a fuller fat, like a whole fat milk? I mean, it has
absolutely. I don't really believe in fat-free, low-fat anything. Full fat milk is, if you're going to use, dairy products, I would encourage you to use full fat, organic, grass-fed whenever you can. But I think at the end of the day, it's definitely about kind of using less. It's definitely not something we should be pushing kind of at every meal.
Yeah. More water.
Yeah, no.
More water,
and so, I mean, that's just a good example just to show people where, sugar creeps up. A lot of times it's very misleading. So for example, if you get like a large sweet tea out at a restaurant, I mean, obviously we know it's loaded with sugar. But when we look at the menu, it says 150 calories. So we're like, oh, well, that's not too bad. But in reality, that translates to 75 grams of sugar.
Oh my
So
gosh.
a typical large sweet tea from a fast food restaurant has anywhere from 60 to 80 grams of sugar in it, but it's only 150 calories.
Wow.
So when we're really dialed into looking at like this calorie and fat, we miss the big picture, especially when it comes to inflammation, because sugar is everywhere.
And so it's not just sugar, the white crystals, right?
No.
So there's other things that we can consume that our body still thinks is sugar. Like it doesn't know the
Correct.
difference, right? So what are some of those?
I mean, basically we're talking about carbohydrates. So when you look at a food label, it actually has total carbohydrates. And then right below it, indented, it says like fiber, sugar. There can be some kind of other things, but those are all factors that are factored into that total carbohydrate. So carbohydrates are broken down in the body very similar to the way that sugar is. There's something called the glycemic index that scientists use to kind of measure a food's response in the body. And the glycemic index for a slice of bread is more than the glycemic index of a tablespoon of sugar.
Wow.
So the body has a higher glycemic response when we eat something like white bread than it does when we actually eat just table sugar. So things like breads, pastas, crackers, things like that actually used to be at the bottom of the food guide pyramid.
To have the most of.
To eat the most of, because they were low calorie and low fat, are way more detrimental than, to obviously vegetables and fruits and things like that.
And they're typically nutrient devoid as well. They don't offer anything except for carbohydrates.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, basically we call them empty calories. A lot of people will argue, you need grains and things like that. And I'm all about moderation, but there's really nothing that you get in the grain group that you can't get from a fruit or vegetable, So using those in moderation, I think, is key.
So then what do you think about the sugar that's in fruit? Is it equivalent or is it?
In some cases, yes. Okay. I call fruit God's candy.
Nice. Okay.
So a lot of people will try to reduce their sugar intake and they're like, I'm not going to drink sweet tea. I'm not going to eat candy, cakes, cookies, pies. And then they flip over and they eat a ton of fruit.
Right.
And at the end of the day, yes, fruit is better. It's got vitamins and minerals and fiber. There's a lot more benefit to eating an apple than there is to eating a piece of candy. But with the way that it responds in the body, with the inflammatory response, it will be similar. So you definitely want to use fruit in moderation. And that was another place that the food guide pyramid got wrong, is because they clumped fruits and vegetables. They would say you need to eat, 6 to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables, when in reality, it should be more like you need to eat 1 to 2 servings of fruits and you need to eat 7 to 10 servings of vegetables a day.
Right. Because
they're not the same.
Yeah. And given the choice, I would think most kids would always choose. I know I would. Fruit. Oh yeah. They said fruit or vegetables. So I'm going with fruit. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think, now, sorry, Meredith, I was just going to say now might be a good time to kind of connect this to how this benefits the endocannabinoid system. I mean, I'm just hearing over and over again, like if you are taking a CBD product and expecting it to bust all these poor diet choices, like you're just, you're really working against yourself.
Yeah.
So
you're fighting an uphill battle for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can't expect to take a coated sugary gummy and reap the benefits, if you're ingesting that. Is there anything in particular, Adrian, that you'd like to add to how it connects? Because that's just what I keep hearing is if you're doing, if you're having a lot of sugar, then you're certainly facing an uphill battle. And when you're maximizing your own health, you're allowing your endocannabinoid system, which is just one of many systems, to function more optimally.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of understanding, again, I think to some degree you have to, we talked earlier, let's not talk about what we have to remove. Let's just talk about what we can add. But if you don't talk about what you can remove, it's almost like saying, well, I'm just going to add CBD to my already poor diet and it's going to do the trick. It's not like saying I'm going to add blueberries or kale to my already poor diet and it's going to do the trick. It will probably help to some degree. You're getting vitamins and minerals, but reducing some of those other things. And again, Amanda spoke about moderation, and we have in other episodes. It's not talking about going cold turkey, making yourself miserable, but baby stepping, I think, into it. And usually when someone starts feeling better, and Amanda has clients everywhere, so she would probably be able to speak to this more than we would, but you start seeing it, you want more, and you want to keep going after it, making those changes.
It's definitely like a snowball effect. And I think I know the people that I work with have this kind of all or nothing mindset. They think they have to be perfect to get all the results and, stay there. And I think even in kind of your scenario, any change in the right direction is a good thing. Right. So if you can pick, kind of one thing that you want to focus on, I'm going to add CBD, and at the same time, I'm going to take out sweet tea, and I'm going to switch that with water. Just making those small shifts and building on that can create that kind of snowball effect.
Okay. I like
That's awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, in particular around the topic of inflammation, nutrition, and how that impacts our endocannabinoid system. So Jessica and Adrian, if someone wanted to know a little bit more about the work that you do, where can they find information?
Yeah, absolutely. Go to our website, bluegrasshempoil.com. Gone through a few minor changes, so come check it out. Also our Facebook, Instagram pages, and we're doing blogs, so follow us.
Fantastic. Well, for this episode of Full Spectrum Living with CBD, I'm your co-host Meredith here with Jessica and Adrian and our guest Amanda. We'll see you all the next time.
Bye.